Taking a quick look at our Module 1 outline, we are done with lessons 1, 2, and 3, and we are now on lesson 4, meaning that after this lesson, we will be 50% of the way through Module 1. So well done to all of you. A quick recap of what we covered in lesson 3. We looked at defining your target market. Then we moved on to targeting options across channels, customer journeys, and why remarketing is crucial. Diving into exactly what we are covering today, we're going to look at content development, the definition of that, and how it differs per channel and platform. Then we're going to look at the psychology of sales, which is incredibly interesting. Just a brief overview of sales triggers and how they can assist your content strategy. Then we will look at writing for SEO and illustrate the difference between content development and copywriting and how these need to work together for SEO. We are looking at SEO in more detail in later modules, but this is a good place to start as it's all about content. So starting off with content development, what does that actually mean? Content development is researching, producing, and publishing information to meet a strategic goal. If we keep this to digital marketing, examples of where content development would be needed are your website, a blog, white papers or ebooks that you decide to create, emails or newsletters, video content, of course, and social media. But before we get into content development a little bit more, you need to understand the difference between that and copywriting. Now, Wikipedia's definition is that copywriting is the act or occupation of writing text for the purpose of advertising or other forms of marketing. The product, called copy, is written content that aims to increase brand awareness and ultimately persuade a person or group to take a particular action. Content developers and copywriters should work hand in hand, particularly when it comes to SEO, as you want to create content that is valuable, but that also increases your rankings with desired keywords in place. As I mentioned, we will be taking a brief look at writing content for SEO in this lesson, but we'll be looking into it in more detail in lesson 3 of module 3, so keep a note of that. Some examples of where you would find copywriting would be in social media posts, of course, video ads, search ads, banners, so things like on a display network or programmatic buying, and an email or newsletter. Now, this lesson is about content development, but I can't tell you exactly what the solution is for you. I'm sure you're used to my little disclaimers here and there by now. The whole topic is incredibly subjective, and there are multiple products, services, goals, targets, personas, you name it out there. So obviously what works for one might not work for another. A great place to start is to try and understand and cater for the decisions behind sales. And this is where the psychology of sales comes in. Content development is primarily there to interest and engage your target audience, but the end goal is realistically always sales. You don't spend hours writing a content piece to captivate people only to say, hey, thanks for reading, and never contact or think about them again. Let's give a bit of background. In 1895, a guy named Harlow Gale was the first psychologist to use theory and scientific methods to study advertising and the process of persuasion. He was the first to develop advertising surveys and experiments that sought to find the effects of advertising on attention and memory. He was very intrigued by how people processed ads, and I'm quoting now, from the time they see the advertisement until they have purchased the article advertised. Psychology has an enormous impact on the effectiveness of advertisements. Once people become consciously aware of an ad, they need to store the message in their memories long enough to provoke a purchase. The advertisement needs to convince or show a target audience that they need or want the item, which then may lead to a purchase or impulse buy. The author of Psychology of Selling, which is a very well-known and widely accepted book by Brian Tracy, claims that there are 6 different buyer personalities. These are different to buyer personas. Try not to get them confused. But first up, we have the apathetic buyer. And as the name suggests, this guy is not interested in anything. Instead of trying to change this buyer's mind, save yourself the time and move on to someone else. There's the self-actualizing buyer, and they know exactly what they want and will not be convinced otherwise. You need to make the most of these valuable prospects and don't try to talk them into anything they haven't already set their hearts on, because they'll just get annoyed and then they'll move on to someone else. Then there's the analytical buyer, and this buyer isn't as interested in reviews and testimonials and things like that. He wants to make his own decision. He will research and compare, check back and forth. You need to be slow and exact with these potential customers, and only truth and the preciseness of each benefit will make it easier for them to buy what you're offering. Then we have the relator buyer, and this is a relationship-oriented buyer, concerned very much with other people's opinions of them and their decisions. They generally have to talk through things quite a bit. To make the sale with these kinds of people, you need to focus on other happy customers, build a relationship over time, and of course, authenticity is definitely the winner here. The driver buyer, these buyers are direct, impatient, and concise. Get straight to the point with these buyers because they're busy and they're preoccupied. These buyers are honestly the performance marketer's dream because they fit into that whole do performance model very nicely. And finally, there's the socialized buyer. And a socialized buyer is outgoing, extroverted, and achievement-oriented. You need to reward these people tangibly for signing up for you, so to speak. This can be in the form of a congratulations email, a coupon, bonus content, etc. Let's look at some sales triggers which apply across all buyer personality types, but also, that doesn't mean that they will work for everyone and every time for your particular product or service, as there are other factors involved, some of which can be guided or controlled by you, and many that can't. Humans make life interesting, don't they? The first trigger is reciprocity. Reciprocity, that's a mouthful, works like this. If you give your potential customers something valuable, they'll feel obligated to give you something in return. This something might be a referral, a sale, an email address, or something else of value to you. And the reason that this works is that we tend to get psychologically uncomfortable when we feel like we owe someone something. Think about it for yourself, in your own personal experience. Obviously, again, this doesn't work on everyone, as some people have that entitlement mentality or are apathetic buyers. Curiosity is a powerful motivator. That's because when you introduce it into your content, it's like creating an itch that needs to be scratched. This is one of the reasons that clickbait works, or at least that's why I think it works. Clickbait, if you don't know what it is, lucky you, it's considered a form of false advertisement which uses hyperlink text or a thumbnail link or, a really catchy headline that is designed to obviously attract attention and entice users to follow that link and to read or view or listen to whatever content it is. But the defining characteristics of clickbait are that they're generally deceptive, typically sensationalized and or misleading. Clickbait is annoying as anything, but it's still around because people still fall for it. Please don't adopt clickbait as a strategy. That's totally not what I'm saying. But don't give away all your good stuff when it comes to invoking curiosity in your potential customers. Package it in a format that makes sense to your business and allows you to gather more information from your potential customer, like an email address or a phone number. There are various objections that people come up with, but let's go through the top 3. I'm sure you've said this one before to yourself. It's too expensive. I actually saw a really good quote on LinkedIn the other day, and it was that price is only ever an issue in the absence of value. People's perceived value of your product or service will differ from person to person, but you can boost the perceived value of your offering by sharing the benefits and clearly stating your unique selling proposition. So, what makes you better? Not just something made up, but a feature or something that makes you unique. Unique is the operative word here. You can also give people a reason why the price is so high. For example, it's more expensive because the quality is better and it will last longer. Or it costs more now, but it will save you in the long term. You used the most advanced tech to create your offering, hence the cost, and etc. The next objection is that the price is too low. Here, the cost of your product might actually be doing you a disservice in terms of perceived value. We've been trained to think that if something is more expensive, then it means it's more valuable. But there are, of course, many other variables at play. To combat this objection, you need to justify why the price is low. For example, we spent time working on reducing production costs so that we could pass those savings on to you. Or even something cheekier, like you could buy 10 of these, lasting you 10 years, and it would still be more affordable than the top brand, which will also last you 10 years, but costs 3 times as much in one go. The third common objective is I can't afford it. But think about it. If you have really wanted something, have you allowed this to stop you? I certainly haven't, particularly if you're seeing it almost every day. And this is why there is a global credit crisis. Again, here you need to justify the price. If you know that you are not competitively priced, don't hide it. Share why you have priced it higher. Are there other benefits? Is quality higher? Do you offer a guarantee or a longer guarantee than competitors? Compare yourself to your competitors and tell everyone why you are better. Offer risk reversal in the form of a guarantee. You might see this as potentially damaging, but of the people who might want to take advantage of a guarantee, very few people actually will because it takes more effort. Another sales trigger is credibility. You need to build credibility for your brand, particularly if you are priced on the higher end of the scale. When someone is reading your promotional content, they're in defense mode, they're skeptical. Why should they listen to you? You can say things like, we've been in business for 10 years, or our customers have a 98% satisfaction rate, or 9 out of 10 clients would refer us to a friend. We work with these credible brands, and so on. Obviously, it needs to be true, but those are the kinds of things that will invoke that feeling of credibility for your brand. Using social proof is important because, and I'm sure you're very surprised to hear this, many people are unsure of themselves. They don't know what they want and they look to other people and follow them. Including reviews and testimonials, perhaps a site visitor's counter on your website, or an automated message every time someone makes a purchase. Not sure if you've seen those actually, but some sites will have a message pop up and then fade away. Something like, Alan from Canada just made a booking. And this is also why, in this day and age, it is critical to secure your social presence. Invoking fear is a very powerful tool. It doesn't have to be as dark and twisted as it sounds, but people have fear of missing out. There's the standard fears of lacking security and comfort. These are all emotions that brands can and do capitalize on. We can argue whether this is moral or not some other time. Fear is used everywhere to promote action, from parents negotiating with their children to politicians using fear in their campaigns. Teachers use the fear of a punishment like detention to get a class in order. A boss uses various consequences to get what they want from you. It is everywhere. Some examples are, if you don't do this thing, you will miss out on a great experience, which is feeding our FOMO, fear of missing out. Or if you don't buy this higher quality product, you run the risk of damaging your property with a knockoff. Or what are you going to do if your car gets stolen? You need insurance to make sure that you're covered. Your children are growing up in a scary place. You need these gadgets to keep tabs on them. You can go on and on and on. You can convey authority in several ways. You need to state your credentials. If you have some position of authority in your niche, then be sure to let others know. This might be a degree or securing high-profile clients, being linked to by well-known publications, etc. You can also borrow other people's authority if you don't have authority of your own. For example, maybe you sell children's toys. You could ask parenting magazines and established bloggers to review it and offer testimonials. You could partner with a business that has a bigger footprint than yours. I'm sure you can think of a recent ad where you've seen authority being used. Something along the lines of 4 out of 5 doctors recommend this, or 9 out of 10 CEOs agree, and etc. You can also radiate authority, or you should radiate authority. You don't have to have any specific credentials to position yourself as an authority in your niche. If you're an expert, then act like one. Have a bit of confidence in yourself. Honesty. Who'd have thought that being honest would go well for you, hey? It would be very nice to see some more businesses being honest, wouldn't it? Don't hide your faults or flaws. Sure, sometimes people don't read. Sometimes they impulse buy or make decisions they later regret. But for the most part, we are not stupid, and we can sense when someone is being honest or not being honest. Trying to hide your faults with clever tactics or meaningless add-ons will only help short-term, if at all. So let's go through some examples. Instead of Listerine completely ignoring the fact that their mouthwash had one of the strongest or worst tastes in the market at the time, they worked with it and they turned it into something to be curious about. They literally said in their taglines, "You can handle it, germs can't." This is almost implying that it's the strong taste of the Listerine that is killing the germs as opposed to anything else. Then they also used, a little bit cheekier, the taste you hate twice a day. When the VW Beetle was introduced, it was considered ugly. I actually think it's quite cute. But instead of shying away from this, one of their taglines became, "Ugly is only skin deep." Not sure how effective that would be in this day and age, but it did wonders back then. Then, just to use a generic example, let's take ugly packaging. We've all seen it, and it's a reality for many products. Let's be honest. You could say something like, it's what's inside that counts. Then finally, we have consistency. People like to see themselves as consistent and committed. Let's face it, even the nicest of us judge people who seem to be all over the place. Lost the plot, haha. If you start with asking a small favor, the chances of someone doing you a bigger favor down the line is greater. An example that Richtopia gave was a study where a small section of households were asked to display a small placard on their window about not littering. Most of them agreed. Another group of people were asked to put a big, ugly sign in their yard, and no one wanted to. They then went back to ask the people who had agreed to place the small sign on their window to place a bigger sign, that ugly sign, in their yard, and they actually agreed to do it. They wanted to be seen as more consistent and committed. They'd agreed to the smaller sign and felt that they had to agree to the bigger sign. So along with all that we've just gone through in terms of the psychology of people and sales triggers, now's a good time to remind you about those buyer personas that you created in Module 1. You are creating content for them, which means that it should be in a format that is most easily consumed by those potential customers. The format that you choose might be a blog post, video, a slide share, a graphic, an ebook, or whatever your creativity gifts you with. But don't just stick to one format for every piece of content you develop. You need to make sure that it is realistic and achievable on a consistent basis. It's perhaps a good idea to apply the SMART goal thinking to your ideas. For example, a vlogging series might be a great marketing tactic, but if you lack the resources to maintain it, then something like a blog might be a better way to go, at least initially. Ask yourself these questions. What stage of the buyer's journey is this for? Have you agreed upon a sales funnel like ADA or VAC or See Think Care Do or any of the other ones out there? Or are you testing the waters? How easy is it for your audience to consume this content? You don't want to provide video content to a demographic of people with high data costs, or launch a podcast series to people who prefer reading or video. What format can you create on a consistent basis and with the same level of quality? Incredibly important. If you start off something and it looks incredible, the first few times, and then later down the line, people can just see that the quality gets lower and lower and lower. People aren't going to hang around for long. They've expected that quality in the beginning, and so they expect it throughout the whole journey. Let's go ahead and assume that you want to start blogging or vlogging. There's unfortunately a difference between content you want to blog or vlog about and content that your target audience will actually enjoy. And there's a further difference between content that is enjoyed and content that leads to something bigger, like a sale. What you write about also needs to be relevant to your industry, though in some cases you can take something seemingly irrelevant and tie it to your brand. First, find successful blog posts from your competitors. You should know who your competitors are, and if you don't, please, that's the first thing you need to look at after this lesson. What indicates success might be different, but generally it will be things like comments, shares, and in the case of vlogging, views. Obviously, on a competitor site, you can't see the number of times a blog post has been viewed, and if there's no interaction or sharing functionality, it might skew things. But seeing what competitors are doing is a great place to start, whether you want to create something similar or make sure you go in a completely different direction. It's also important to see what kind of blog posts are popular for successful bloggers around your niche. So not competitors, but bloggers who write about your niche or industry. And then try to write something similar, yet better or with a new angle for your own blog. This technique is called skyscraping. News aggregators like Feedly.com, go check them out, Feedly.com, allow you to keep on top of industry info, though you might already have a good idea of where to keep updated on your niche. Feedly.com has a free and paid option. Social sites, also like Reddit, also have threads where industry news and updates are posted. A little bit of research online will help you where to look, but in the next lesson, we'll be looking at a few more tools for content research and generation ideas. Look at social media and online communities. For example, you can log into Twitter to see their list of which topics are trending. Other social media platforms do this as well. You can look at popular hashtags on Instagram. You can check your online community pages on Facebook, threads on Reddit, and etc. Platforms like Reddit and Quora are useful to look at as people ask questions on a variety of topics here, and it can actually give you a nice indication of the types of things people are struggling with. Could your brand or your blog help them? Essentially, anything that you blog about, you can vlog about. And in terms of getting even more out of your video content, you can introduce a few strategies to increase your income. Monetization becomes an option when you are seeing a lot of views on your content. This is where ads are placed before, during, or after your vlogs, and you're paid a small percentage if someone clicks on that ad. We'll look into this in more detail in the next lesson, and here I'm particularly referring to YouTube. You can also pitch for sponsorships, though this is difficult to achieve when just starting out. And then, of course, there is affiliate marketing, which we're going into in lesson 4 of this module. But affiliate marketing is essentially where you are paid a percentage for promoting someone else's product. For your website content, this is a little bit more complicated, but you need to ensure that you create content that informs, educates, and guides your audience. Examples of content for your site could be thought leadership articles, that's radiating that authority that we spoke about earlier. Then premium content, for example, something like a white paper or an ebook. Your services. You obviously want to make sure your service is as attractive and compelling as possible. Case studies and client testimonials are always a good idea to have these on your site if they apply. A portfolio. This applies to services mainly and not all of them. But if you're a creative, then a portfolio is absolutely necessary to showcase your previous work. And this also builds on your credibility. Your about page. I'm sure you've seen many of these on the sites that you visit. They are basically a standard on each site. And it's a chance to showcase the human side of your brand. You use it to tell your story, what inspired you to start, what you stand for, etc. You could have a team page. Again, this humanizes your brand. And if potential customers can see the people behind the name, they will feel more comfortable. If you're expanding or seeing rapid growth, then having up-to-date career opportunities on your site is an absolute must. FAQs goes without saying. You can start by aggregating the queries that you have received or researching the common questions asked if you're just starting out. And videos, these are the most popular format on the internet right now. You can create videos for almost anything. A tour of your office, meeting your team, a day in the life, behind the scenes, client testimonials, new product updates, and much, much more. There are some standard considerations to think about, no matter what format you choose. You need to use the right language. As you write your content, it's critical to speak the same language as your audience. Use terms that your audience will understand, as opposed to filling your content with jargon. Obviously, if your audience is more advanced or technical, your content does not need to be as simplified. But no matter how you write, you need to convey your expertise and familiarity with the subject. Apart from blog articles or other thought leadership content, your website content, in the case of choosing a format, should be more conversational than formal. Write quality content, not quantity content, if you know what I mean. And this ties into the next point, where content should ideally be a minimum of 300 words. This is for SEO purposes, as well as ensuring that you're adequately covering a topic. But, and this is a big but, don't add fluff into your content just to reach a target word count. Statistics, research, and quotes are effective ways to add substance to your copy and ties into credibility and authority as well. Quality images and graphics should go without saying. Think of the different screens people will consume your content on. An image that looks great on a small mobile screen might look terrible on a 1080 by 1920. That's just like a standard screen size of a monitor, if it has a low DPI. DPI stands for dots per inch and is essentially just that. How many little ink dots make up all the so-called lines in the image. If there are fewer, then the image will look worse as it gets bigger. You need to proofread thoroughly. Once you're happy with it, get a few people to look over it, as fresh eyes can pick up things you might have missed as a result of looking at it for too long. Everyone does this. It doesn't mean you're a terrible proofreader or writer or anything like that. It just is the way it is. And make your content easy to read by breaking it up into a list or using subheadings. Leave space between your paragraphs. And if you're going to justify your text, make sure it doesn't leave those obscenely long spaces between words like it sometimes does. When it comes to writing or developing content, and specifically for your website, we need to consider SEO all the time. We will be going into more detail on writing for SEO in lesson 3 of module 3. but let's go through some standard considerations. You need to choose a keyword, and by choosing a keyword, you need to do keyword research and focus on long tail keywords as well as shorter ones. Just to remind you, a short keyword would be something like healthy recipes, but a long tail keyword could be healthy recipes with low carb options. Also, see how these could make you focus your content differently. You could have an article that focuses around generic healthy recipes, but then you could be developing more content for healthy recipes specifically with low carb options. Just an idea, but that's what I mean by the shorter keywords and the long tail keywords. You need to write a good title of 8 to 12 words and a maximum of 60 characters. And it must be simple but descriptive. No problem, hey? Maybe try to think of it like that alt tag exercise that we did in lesson 5 of module 1. Go back and have a look if you think it might help. Include the most relevant keyword in your URL. We also spoke about this in lesson 5 of the previous module. You also need to mention the keyword early in the page, in the first 100 words or in the subheading. This helps the crawlers, the search engine bots, to understand your content more efficiently. As I mentioned, content should be at least 300 words long, but ideally 600 or more. Search engines tend to favor in-depth content of at least 2,000 words. Use variations of your keywords, but don't overdo it. It must still read naturally. Sticking with the recipes theme, you could have kids' recipes and recipes for kids. Those are variations of the same topic. Internal links using anchor text. You should link to other sections of your site where relevant. Anchor text is the text within content that has been hyperlinked to another page. For example, you could have a cake recipe on your site, and within that, where you talk about the method of beating eggs, you could link the words beating eggs to another piece that you wrote on how to best beat your eggs. I just realized how strange that sounds, but I hope that makes sense. You should also have other websites linked to your page. This is just a sentence at this point. We are covering this in more detail in Module 3, but it is referring to those backlinks that we touched on in Module 1. And then once you've published your content, your job is only halfway done. This is where getting to grips with a tool like Google Analytics is very helpful. Again, we're taking another look at analytics in Lesson 8 of this module. The following metrics that I'm going to mention now, we have spoken about them before, but not in the context of content performance. A good thing to know is the average amount of time it would take someone to read your full piece of content or view it or whatever it is. And essentially, that would become your benchmark. People need to be spending at least that amount of time on your page. You can monitor performance by looking at bounce rate, which is the percentage of people who leave the site after visiting one page. Remember, we covered that previously as well. Time on site and pages per session. If bounce rate is high, but the average time on the page is quite high, then this could be a sign of interesting content. The fact that people didn't visit other pages, though, could signal a lack of interest, a lack of internal linking, poor site navigation, etc. If there is an action that you want people to take after reading your content, then of course this is something to monitor as well. You could then create a list of people who have spent the desired time on your site, regardless of bounce rate, and target them with additional content or an ad, etc. Some very important things to be avoided and monitored. First up, we have plagiarism. It is an evil word. As I mentioned in the last module, duplicate content will be picked up by search engine crawlers, which will damage your SEO ranking. Duplicate content being picked up by potential customers will damage your reputation. So please stay away from this completely. Pages that aren't mobile friendly. You learned about the importance of mobile in lesson 4 of the last module. If your text or images render means display, terribly on mobile, avoid actively sending traffic to it. And of course, endeavor to fix those issues as quickly as possible. Don't make people bounce around your site looking for answers to their original question or interest. This is actually called pogo sticking. And here, remember, I'm not talking about bounce rate. I'm talking about people going from page to page and not necessarily spending a lot of time on it, which could signal that they're not actually finding the answer to your question. The fact that they're still bouncing around your page or your website, though, does at least tell you that they haven't given up yet. And then broken links. Links can break for multiple reasons, so it's good to keep a record of the links on your site and check them regularly. A less manual way to approach this is to look at your Google Search Console, which will list any broken links. Unbroken. We'll discuss this in more detail in Module 3. I think if you haven't already, now might be a good time to think about going back to Module 1 and viewing some of the recordings. Maybe there are some topics or lessons that you haven't quite fully grasped, or you just haven't remembered, and of course that's perfectly normal. But that's the great thing about this course, is that you can go back at any time and watch any of these recordings to kind of refresh your memory. Now, we'll be focusing a lot more on copywriting than content development in the rest of this course. Instead of me lumping it into one lesson, as we go through the different platforms and strategies, we will discuss creating and optimizing copy. We touched on elements of copywriting in Module 1, like the importance of call to actions and asking a question, but here are some overall do's and don'ts to consider. Attention-grabbing headlines. Your headline is arguably the most important part of your copy and your content, whether it's copywriting, so for an ad, or for content development, because no one will read the rest if the headline doesn't get their attention. Think about the sales triggers that we went through, the problems that your product or service is solving, your call to actions, and etc. Use clear and direct words. Avoid fluff. In many cases, you won't have enough characters to convey the full message you envisioned in the case of ad creation, so practicing this is important and very helpful. Inspire them to take action. This is where the CTAs, or call to actions, come in. It might sound like an obvious thing. Someone sees an ad, is interested, and therefore comments or clicks or shares, right? Wrong. Tell them what the next step is. Build up trust. Convey that you are reliable. If you have been around for a long time, show it. Use things you can prove, like 4 out of 5 of our customers recommend us to their friends. This is tying back to those sales triggers. Don't be pompous or self-important. People don't like egos, even if they themselves have a massive one. If you aren't the best, as in you haven't been voted or determined the best by any authority, don't say that you are. There are other ways that you can convey the same kind of thing. You could say leaders in manufacturing or top-class service, etc. Don't use jargon or difficult words. These are not the same thing. Unless you are solely advertising to people who are experts in your industry, jargon isn't necessary. If you sell images, you wouldn't say 300 DPI images at great prices. You would say maybe something like crystal clear images at great prices. Difficult words, don't say prepossessing when you could say beautiful. Do you know what I mean? And finally, at least for now on this topic, don't exaggerate. Let's say you own a restaurant. Don't say there's nothing worse than cold food. There are plenty of things worse than cold food. When trying to inject some humor, exaggeration can have a place, but otherwise avoid it. Before we close off, a core part or strategy around content development and publishing is digital PR. PR stands for public relations. Digital PR is an online marketing strategy used by businesses to increase their online presence. Digital PR agencies network with journalists, bloggers, and influencers and send online press releases to gain high quality backlinks, social media mentions, and to improve SEO. Digital PR is an evolution of PR. Instead of only targeting print publications, digital PR focuses on online publications and brand awareness. Some common tactics employed by someone in digital PR would be to publish articles online. PR professionals work incredibly hard to create, maintain, and increase their network of publishers. They network to gain backlinks. So instead of publishing the article on another site, the site itself would link to the content piece in their own content. And this ties back to writing content for SEO and increasing your SEO rankings by getting more and more authority sites to link to you. We touched on this in the last module and we'll be going into it again in module 3. I'm sorry if I keep on saying that, but I just want to remind you of what's to come and get you excited for it. Press releases and syndicating newsworthy content. I'm using a difficult word there, aren't I? Syndicating is publishing. These might not necessarily be in the form of traditional articles. They also approach bloggers to gain backlinks and mentions. There's influencer marketing, which is adopted as a strategy, and we will look into this more in lesson 4. There are affiliate programs with bloggers and vloggers, for example. More on this in lesson 4 too. Offline events that aim to gain online coverage. For example, live tweeting what's happening at the event, sharing images of the event on social network channels, publishing a newsletter article about it, etc. Then publishing infographics. Infographics are an incredibly popular format, shared widely and readily. Okay, so let's look at what's coming up in your next lesson, which is a continuation of the content development and copywriting discussion, but specifically for video, as well as some tools to help you generate content. You will learn the difference between video content and ads, video advertising formats and targeting capabilities, and then planning considerations for both video content and video ads. Now, whatever brought you to this course, the full experience and benefit of it can't be realized if you deprioritize your lessons. So please continue to attend them, watch the recordings if you miss any, and let's keep on this wild skill ride together. See you later.